Hey everyone, welcome to this section of the course. This is the refactored script for Amazon Purchase Bot using Selenium. So in the last section, what we did was we basically wrote a script that served as a purchased a certain product. Now this script was like a proof of concept. It was written to like get the job done. Well, what we will be doing now is more on working on step 2 and step 3 of my personal coding process, which is making the code more efficient, readable, and making the code reusable as well. So with that, let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my command prompt, and from there, I'm going to go ahead and go to Jupyter Notebook. Once I'm there, I'm gonna go over to wherever the contents for this course are located. For me, it is over here. And we're gonna go ahead and go to the refactored script for purchase bot. So I'm gonna go ahead and open this up. And as always, I'm gonna open up another Python file where I'll go through and walk through everything that's going on in this script. So I'm gonna label this. Okay, cool. So now I am going to bring this to the side and go over here and bring this to the side. Okay, cool. So as always, so there's a lot going on here, but it's very similar to what we did in writing our script, and we're basically going to recreate this. But I'm going to go ahead and walk you through how I got to this point. So the first step, if you remember from the script, we just imported some libraries. The next step was to in the script we had a lot of variables that we defined. So for example, there was the whole URL that we defined. There was the Chrome driver path, Chrome profile path. So let's talk about the ASIN. So Amazon.com has, the way they identify products is through something called ASIN. So this serves as a product identifier. This is the ASIN for the mouse pad that we were purchasing. So instead of, if we're reusing this and we're thinking of reusability, right? We want to use this for like other products that use similar workflow. Now remember, the workflow will differentiate for different products. Like for some products, it might ask you, hey, do you want insurance and whatnot, right? So, but for certain products, this workflow will work, right? So what we want to do is make it reusable. So what we do is instead of working with the URL, we're gonna work with the ASIN only. And so I'm actually gonna take this out. And then we had like our name that I'm defining here, our address line 2, city, state, zip code, phone number, whatever your credit card number is, and whatever message you want to put on that gift receipt, or the gift message that we added, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run all this so that Python has all these variables. Now let's go back to this class, right? So let's first just copy this guy right here. So what this is doing, this is basically I have a Amazon purchase bot class. Within that class, I have an initialization function. So whenever I call this class, this is what is ran, and it's expecting, self refers to this object that it's going to create, which is going to be our driver. But let's see some of the other things it's expecting. Basically, it's expecting our Chrome driver path, Chrome profile path, everything we basically defined here. And then so what we do from those things is the first step we have is that we do the same thing. We did this um, in the script as well, where we use the options driver from or Chrome options. We create an options object, and then we pass the Chrome profile path to that option, and then we create a driver from WebDriver Chrome, where we pass the Chrome driver path, which was the executable path, as well as the Chrome options we just defined right here. Except in this case, what we're doing is that within this class, we're creating a self object, which basically is our driver. And you'll see what I mean by this in a second, but we're basically doing that for the ASIN, the name, so on and so forth. So what does this mean? So let's try this real quick, right? I'm going to run this piece of code. And so now I'm going to use this class and create an object called bot. And I'm going to say that this is going to be created from the Amazon purchase bot. And here I'm going to pass in essentially everything that I just defined, and everything that it's expecting in the Chrome in the initialization function. It's not expecting self, right? So what does this do? So basically, I'm creating an object called bot, which comes from the Amazon purchase bot class, and I'm passing in all these parameters into this class that will help me initialize this object, right? And so what will happen is you'll see a window pop up here, but we're actually not going to worry about this too much. I'm first want to show you what's going on with this right here. Actually, yeah, so I'm going to put this to the side, and I'm going to show you guys. So now if I have, if I do bot.asin, it will pass in the ASIN number that I passed in, right? And so same thing with bot.name. So within bot, there's within the bot, so I basically created a class with like all these parameters off of it that I passed in as variables in the initialization function. So same thing for city, address, add line 1, so on and so forth. It's essentially coming down to here, but this is what is like object-oriented programming language, right? This is basically an object that has all these properties. Think of it like that. So now that I have this, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring this to the side, and I'm going to go ahead and create this. And so I'm still going to be working off the script or the code that's in the refactored code that I just showed you. But we'll just be adding to this Amazon purchase bot class, right? So the first thing I did in the script, and the first thing I'll do here, is basically go to the website, right? And the way I do that is, and remember, we're indenting here. We're indenting because this is a class, then these are the functions within that class. So we have the initialization function that help like set up all the properties and whatnot. And then now we are creating a go-to product URL function. So what this function is basically saying is that it's going to refer to this self means that it's going to refer to this class that was created, or it's going to refer to like the self object that was part of the initialization function that was created, right? So instead of me passing in like the URL or the ASIN here, I am basically passing in the self object and then calling the ASIN off the self object. So let's see how this works in theory, right? We have what we did before. Let's break this down a little further. So we had, I'm going to close these guys out. So we had this formatting that we went over in the Python basics, but we basically have this ASIN, right? And the link is going to remain the same. The only thing that's going to change is this ASIN number whenever like you use this for other products that use a similar workflow. So when I do this, what essentially happens is that I'm formatting it, and so the curly brackets represent like, hey, that I'm expecting a value here, and then I basically say a dot format, and I pass in whatever that value is. So this basically turns into that. So each time when I'm calling this function, right, or when I'm initializing the class, I can basically pass in a different ASIN and it will go to that website. So this is like a way of dynamically creating the website. So now let's talk about what's happening with here. So let me run this, since I added to this class, let me run this piece of code. So I ran it. I'm going to initialize this bot class again. So I'm actually going to close this and initialize this again, and you'll see the window pop open. So now from bot, since this is a function from this class, I can call this function, right? And I can just say that, hey, go to product URL. So bot and go to product URL. And what is it going to do? It's going to go, it's basically going to say that, hey, call the driver that was created in this initial, when this class was initialized, and then go to this URL, and then dynamic, the URL is dynamic because I'm passing in the ASIN dynamically off of what was off the self object. So let's see what happens here. So it basically does the same thing that it was doing in the script, right? So now the next step that we want to do is we want to create a function that will add the product to cart. So this is what this function is doing. Same thing. I'm adding this function to the class, to the Amazon purchase bot class. So I have this right here, and find element by ID, add to cart button, which was this element right here. So I'm actually going to do this manually just so we go on to the next step. So the next step was to go to the checkout, hit the proceed to checkout button. And if you notice, I'm adding a sleep function with the 3-second wait. What this does is basically say that, hey, wait for 3 seconds before doing anything. WebDriver has that functionality as well, but for the purpose of this course, I'm using just the sleep function. And it basically means that, hey, wait for 3 seconds. And you can make it wait for like 30 seconds or 300 seconds, whatever have you. But because the web page takes a little, like each time you click a button, it takes a little bit of time to like load. I build in this buffer to kind of like, hey, wait 3 seconds and then go to the next step. Because if it tries to, like, let's say that it tried to add to cart button and I didn't have the sleep function, it would go straight to this. And if this page hadn't loaded, it would give me an error because it wouldn't be able to find this checkout button in the web page HTML code. So this is I'm adding another function called proceed to checkout. Now, once I hit this, my next job is to like add a new address, right? So the way I add a new address, now let's look at the function for adding a new address and let's break it down. So in this function, the first thing that's happening is you're essentially just clicking on this button, which is fine. And then it's waiting for 3 seconds again, because in case the page takes super long to load up. Next, I'm creating this is what in the Python basics class we had this, and this is a dictionary object, right? So what is this dictionary object? It's essentially, let me create this elsewhere. Let's not, it's getting the, the self.name and whatnot is referring to the self object that's within this class. But let's take it a bit, instead of, let's just analyze this, right? So what does, it's a dictionary is a key pair. So instead of self dot, I'm just going to show this example. So it's a key value pair. So here, the key, if I call widget info 0, or not 0, but widget info full name, it will, the value that's stored is the name with it, right? So essentially here, I'm creating a dictionary object where it's using it's defining a lot of these keys, and the value for these keys is based on this, the properties of the self object that I passed in when I initialized the Amazon purchase bot class. So here what's going on is I've created a dictionary object. So how am I using that dictionary object, right? I'm creating a for loop, because if you remember in the script, it was essentially, I had mentioned that, hey, it's a lot of reusable code that, the only thing that changed in the element was instead of enter address full name, it would be enter address line 1, line 2, line 3, so on and so forth. So let's give an example of this. So if I do I've already defined widget info outside of this, right? And so if I do actually, let me define it one more time. So let's break this down a little bit further. So we had widget info, and for the purpose of this, I'm just gonna share. I'm breaking down the code. So instead of passing in the self object and the values from there, I'm just passing in the raw variable values that I had defined earlier in my code. So let's go here, and let's go to. So what is length? Let's break this code down, or this for loop down, right? So the first thing is length widget info. So what is length widget info? It is 7, which makes sense because there's 7 things in here. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Remember, the index starts at 0, but the length is actually calculated from 1 through 7. So now that I have that, the what is range length widget info? So this is basically range 7, which means it's from 0 to 7. So it includes 0, but not 7. So when I do for I and range this, and I just do a simple print I, it basically goes from 0 to 6. And if you think about it, this starts at 0, so it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So this is a quick and easy way to loop through this dictionary that I have created. Now, when I'm looping through this dictionary, what I'm doing is I'm essentially, just like how I formatted the URL in the earlier function, I'm formatting this particular ID, right? Because when I'm finding element by ID, the only thing that changed when I was typing in the address is like, the full name, the address line 1, line 2 is this field right here. And so what I'm doing is I'm basically saying that, hey, find element by ID, and I'm formatting it, and I'm passing in the, the key at that index when I'm looping through it. So let's say that, let's get this right here. So something like this, right? So the first one would be 0. So let's see what it does at 0. Oops. And 0. So the first time it would go through here, and let me bring this as well. And I'm going to pass in a0. So this essentially is a dynamic way of changing the this field right here, because I'm passing in on the first try I passed in the full name, which is this right here. On the second try I pass in the line 1. On the third try line 2, and so on and so forth. So for example, when I run this, it would do something like this. And so 0, I'm pressing I because that's what represents the index. And I do a print. Let's make this X. And let's print X, right? So you can see that it looped through that dictionary object from this little logic that I created. And from this, I'm dynamically formatting the element ID based on this dictionary that I created. So the first time it loops through the element. The element ID is address UI widgets, enter address full name. And the second time is address line 1, line 2, so on and so forth. So essentially, we don't have, we are limiting by using this for loop, we're limiting the amount of code that's there. It's still executing all the code that we need, but it's much more easier and, easier to read and easier to understand, and it's not repetitive code. So on the first try, I'm passing in the key value. So I'm passing in, or the key itself. And on the second one, I'm passing in the value, which is the name object, the address line 1, the actual value of that. So same thing here. And then finally, I'm passing in, or I'm finding an element by adding the add address button. And then I am doing hitting the save address and whatnot if it asks me to verify that address. So let's run this piece of code, or let's add this to our class, right? And let's run this. And I'm actually going to go ahead and close this. Before I close it, though, I am going to take out this, so return to cart. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this from my cart. And I'm going to close this. Now, so I've added 4 functions here, right? I've added the go to product URL, add product to cart, proceed to checkout, and then this add new address. So let's see what happens. So I run this block of code again. And then I am initializing my Amazon purchase bot class again. And this will open up that web page because that's part of the initialization. So the first function is just to go to the URL, which it does there. The second function is to add product to cart. So I'm just gonna call this off the, and here remember, like self, it's understood that this is what it's referring to, this class right here. So well, it's understood by that self object that, hey, it's referring to whatever the self object is in the class. So add product to cart. Oh, oops. Run that. So that's add products to the cart. Then I go to proceed to checkout. So bot dot, and I can just hit tab, or I should be proceed to checkout. So I call the proceed to checkout function that hits this line right here, or that button. Now let's see if my add new address function works. So let's go to add new address is a function from the bot class. And let's see what this does. So if you notice, this is going to add like all the stuff that we needed. And it actually did not ask me to verify it again. So that's why we had to try and accept, because this time around it didn't ask me to, verify that that my address was correct. So now we're up to this point. So let's go on a little further. So the next thing now to do is to add the credit card information, right? So I'm gonna overwrite this code. Okay, close some of this code out. Okay, so this select credit card function, what it's basically doing the same thing. It's calling the driver from the class, and then it's finding some elements. So the first thing it's doing, it's like finding this button. If it's not clicked, it's clicking that. It's in a try and accept block, so it will try these things, and if these things work, great. If not, it'll move on to the next thing. So it's clicking this, and then it's hitting the use this payment button, and then it's typing in the card number, hitting verify card, and then hitting the use the payment button again. I'm actually not going to, for right now, I'm just going to leave this as is. And I'm going to add this to my class, right? And the next thing I want to do is add the gift option. So the gift option is fairly self-explanatory as well. What we're doing is we are calling the we're adding this to the class, the Amazon Purchase Bot class, and then we're finding element add gift options, and then we're writing a message, and we're passing that message that we defined earlier, which was this right here, and we're passing that in. And now the last thing we're doing is hitting that, this save gift options button. So let's save this as well in my class. And then the last thing to do is to submit the order itself. Right? So all this is doing is that once everything is done, it's just going to hit submit order button. And then what I'm doing is basically I'm writing another function that basically uses all these functions. So instead of, me having to write out that, hey, bot, go to URL, hey, bot, go, add product to cart, I'm basically creating a function that calls these functions within this class. So the auto order function will look at which class it's in and then call these functions, and so on and so forth. Now, one thing I've done is I've commented this out just because I don't want to actually purchase this object or this product. So now let me run this piece of code. Let me also delete this from my cart before I do that. So I deleted it. I'm going to close it. I'm going to run this block of code for my class. I'm going to run this as well. So I'm initializing my class, and let's see what happens. So instead of calling, each individual function, I'm just going to do bot.autoorder. And this particular one is going to fail at the credit card options, because for credit card, you have to have like your card number, and I'm passing an invalid card number. But I just want you guys to see what happens, so you guys understand what's going on with the code. So let's go ahead and hit run. And so with just this line of code, see, my hands are up in the air. It's gonna hit the add to cart button, or it should. Yep. It has a 3-second wait, so it might take a little bit longer. Let's see. Looks like there was a issue. It says message not interactable. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to increase the, so where, let's read into this error. This is good. So this error happens at if you like it happens at the first thing that ran was auto order, and then within auto order it was able to add product to cart, but within proceed to checkout it gave an error, and the error was that element not interactable. So let's go to proceed to checkout. So add site sheet checkout button. So it looks like everything is right from here. So it looks like we might just need to increase the sleep function because my internet might be a little bit slower. So I'm gonna just add instead of 3 seconds, I'm gonna do a 5 seconds. And I'm gonna go ahead and go back to cart. Delete this, close this guy. And I'm gonna go ahead and run this piece of code again. And run this piece of code again, which will open up this window. And now let's try to run it one more time. This should fix the issue. And that's why like the time functionality is there. So once I run this now, it will go ahead and add to cart. I think I hovered over it. So let's try this one more time. And again, this is just like, seeing code and seeing its capability. It's not like by any means production ready code. It's just like to kind of show you guys how you would go about refactoring the script. Let me go ahead and close this, and let me go ahead and open it. I forgot to delete the object from my cart, so I'm actually going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to Amazon. Oops, what happened? I'm gonna go to, why does it keep doing that? Okay. I'm gonna go to Amazon.com. I'm gonna go to my cart. Okay, there's nothing in my cart, so we're actually good there. So close this out, run this code again. Okay, third time's the charm. I'm gonna run this piece of code. So it's gonna go to that website, hit add to cart. Once it hits add to cart, the proceed to checkout button is gonna load. It's gonna go ahead and hit the proceed to checkout button. Then I already have this address in there, but it's gonna add a new address for Joe Johnson. It's gonna add that address, save it, and it's gonna hit use this payment method. It's gonna ask me to verify it. Now it typed in your card number here, and obviously, so that was the issue. That's why this code broke. But if you wrote the correct, credit card number, or if I wrote it here, it would hit verify number, it would hit use this payment method, and then it would, if I didn't have this commented out, it would hit the submit order button. So let's go back to this piece of code, right? So I kind of went over like how this class is functioning. So let's go ahead and write it out as it was in the original one. So first I'm importing this library, and then I'm creating a class with all this functionality in there. Then I'm defining my variables. I'm actually going to delete this guy right here. And then the 2 lines of code I'm writing are to initialize the class that I have just created. And the second one is to use the auto order functionality of this from this class, which basically is it's it's basically all the functions that we created in order. So I'm going to go ahead and close this guy out, close this out. And that's essentially like our refactored code. So we went from, what was in there to something like this. So essentially each time we run this code, all we really have to change is this, like, this, your Chrome driver and path would not change because you're using the same Amazon account, but I just kept that in there in case like somebody from another computer is using this, and so the other objects we had were name, some address variables, our card number, our message, and so on and so forth. And then in this process, in this line of code, we initialized the code, and then we did the auto order. So now we've basically refactored our code. So we went from the script to, which was like very like, hey, one-time use kind of deal, to something that's very reusable, to something that's like fairly easy to comprehend. It's more effective. We created this for loop to get rid of like a lot of code when we were entering address in and whatnot. So we just made our code better. In the next section, I'll basically make a package out of this class, and I'll show you guys how to do that, so that all we really have to do is run this piece of code, and we don't have to like write this every single time. So thank you guys for coming to this section, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed the functionality of the script we created, and I'll see you guys at the next section. Thank you.